Hey guys, let's look at the classic car market. What's going on with it? Are prices going up? Are they going down? Is there availability? What sort of car should you be considering? Particularly in light of what's been going on. And here in London, in the southeast of England, we have the ultra low emission zone, ULEZ, which has now encompassed the whole of the London area. And of course, that impacts certain modern classics, such as the one I own. And we can't drive these cars anymore unless we pay the £12.50 daily charge. Has that had an impact on the classic car market? Or does it not make a difference? Well, you know what? Let's find out. Let's talk to a buddy of mine, somebody I met at the British Motor Show, where he was consultant to the Eubanks Classic Car Auction. He's a classic car trader and consultant. So let's bring him on and let's find out what's happening with the classic car market, and also which are the top picks and best buys for next year.
A brown car guy.
Hi guys, and today I've got a good buddy of mine, Matt. We met at the British Motor Show just last month. It seems like a while back, but it was just last month, wasn't it?
That seemed like ages ago now, yeah.
It does, doesn't it? But what an incredible event that was. And you were there
amazing.
Representing Eubanks, and you were sort of acting as a consultant for them. Eubanks was doing their first live in-person classic car auction at the British Motor Show, and we met on the stand there, and we did a little video together, which was a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah, it was really good.
Introduce yourself. Tell everybody about who you are and a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm Matt Groom. I've been in the car business since 2007. It started off as a hobby, to be honest with you. I've loved cars since I was a kid, buying Matchbox cars, and it just went from there. And I was in the mobile phone business, and then I sort of was buying and selling cars on the side, and it just went from there, and it grew and grew and grew, and it was just a passion of mine, and and it's gone from there, and I worked for Eubanks as a consultant, and we did it was a very successful sale at the British Motor Show. I've just been buying and selling cars. I've run a car showroom. I've run an online car sales business up until COVID, and then obviously that was interesting, the COVID time, and I sold that business, and now I'm sort of on my own, buying and selling classic cars, working at Eubanks. Eubanks are taking up quite a lot of my time, which is good, and it's a new thing for them, growing the classic car side, and it's been going from strength to strength.
Now, what I noticed at the motor show was a quite an eclectic mix, I should say, of cars that were up for auction. So, because a lot of people, when you say classic car auctions, they have certain image jumps into their mind of sort of vintage, very high end automobiles and stuff like that. But in reality, there you had everything from a rickshaw to
your favorite.
To the Trans Am. I mean, it was extraordinary.
Right. Yeah, it was. Well, there was something there for everyone. It's not just classic cars; it's modern classic cars. That's what I call them. There's something there for everyone. That's an affordable price, up to obviously the Elvis, the TE21, which was
that was beautiful.
140,000. So that's a different league. But we're just trying to do a general kind of car auction which fits everyone's sort of bill, really. It's interesting, and that's why I think it was successful, because obviously there was something there for everyone, and people who came along bought a car as well. So they hadn't seen that, they saw that the auction was there, and they came along and bought a car. They saw it, they liked it, and they bought it on the day, which is amazing.
It was amazing. I mean, just to see when we started off the auction, when I was there to kick off proceedings, and just to see the crowd gather and sort of really enthusiastic and really energetic about the whole thing. I thought, wow, this is going to be good.
Because everything is online nowadays, as you know. A lot of car auctions are held online. I mean, the big players, obviously BCA, Mannheim, that's just all online. They're just they don't hold live auctions, which I find is a real shame, as I love car auctions. I've spent many days.
It's quite exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. That's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be in the car auction. I spent hours and hours and hours and drinking lots of cups of tea and bacon, sandwiches. I've spent a lot of time at BCA and Mannheim.
do you think that a live auction scenario
Yeah.
would actually net you better sales prices than an entirely online auction?
Because the thing is, online and a live auction, then you're competing against each other. So yeah, you do get better prices. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you
Yeah,
do.
because I was just thinking about the human psychology of, if you're in the heat of the moment and you can see
Yeah,
somebody else bidding and then
that's
you're
right.
like, I don't want to be outbid. And,
Yeah.
it gets quite competitive, doesn't it?
I think that's what happened at the motor show, and a couple of the cars that were there, and the people were bidding there and then, and they were competing against the online side. Yeah, it was really exciting. For
So
people
let's
buying the
talk
cars.
about what the situation is at the moment. And
Yeah,
you and I had this discussion before. And I tell you, like as you know, I've been doing a lot of coverage on ULEZ, and ULEZ being the ultra low emission zone
yeah,
that just at the end of last month was expanded to cover the whole of Greater London, right up to the M25 in some cases.
yeah,
And as a result of that, for anybody that doesn't know, it's a stringent requirement upon the emissions of vehicles. So all vehicles now driven in London, petrol have to comply to Euro 4 standards and diesel have to comply to Euro 6 standards.
yeah,
What that means in real terms is that diesels after 2016 are the only 2016 and after are the only ones that are allowed. And petrol, they could go back as far as the late 90s, but in most cases, it's 2006 onwards. If
yeah.
your car doesn't comply, you have to pay £12.50 a day.
That's
Now,
right.
that also actually impacts classic cars.
Yeah,
And in the UK, we
absolutely.
have a situation where a classic car is recognized as classics if it's 40 years plus, and that's a rolling 40 years. So we're in 2023 at the moment, so anything older than 1983 would be considered a historic. It would have to be registered as a historic, and then it
Yeah,
would be exempt. However, you then have a scenario. So if it's 1983, so you're looking at cars prior to that, you have a
yeah.
scenario where 80s and 90s potential classics are not actually included in that.
No, that's right. Yeah,
And the reason that I myself first got into looking at ULEZ was because I just bought a 1989 BMW E30, which I consider to be a classic, and most people
yeah.
consider to be a classic, but
Which
is
it
not
is.
actually
Yeah,
a classic
it's
according
a
to them.
modern classic. Modern
Sorry,
classic. It's a
it's a
modern
modern
classic.
classic,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So Matt, actually, so now that we've gotten into this,
yeah.
could you spend a few minutes just defining sort of the different categories of classic automobiles as they were?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, you got the 50s that are a proper classic 50s, 60s, and 70s cars. They are, I class as a classic car. And then you've got the 80s, which are the modern classic cars. And as you say, up to 83, they're a good bet at the moment because obviously they're ULEZ compliant. And if they're registered historic. And then after that, obviously, I call them a modern classic. I mean, you mentioned earlier that pre 2006 petrol cars, aren't ULEZ. Some are actually. I've come
Yeah.
across some cars at
Oh, no,
2001.
no, no. Yeah, exactly. Some as far back as the late
Which,
90s.
yeah, which actually are a modern classic for argument's sake, like a Golf GTI 1.8 turbo, and they're coming into their own, the Mark IV Golf after
Yeah.
2001. Generally speaking, obviously they are ULEZ, especially. I mean,
So
that's
So let's break that down,
mm,
actually, because this is really interesting. Because this leads into, so for example, just to paint the picture, I went to a car event a few weeks back. It
yeah,
was held by West London Classics, and I would say probably 60% of the cars there, and the guys that own the cars,
yeah,
they probably fell into the 80s, 90s modern classic era category.
yeah,
And there was a lot of discussion about what happens now,
yeah,
And similarly, there were a lot of E30 owners, BMW E30 owners.
yeah,
This is
yeah.
the
There
3
will be, yeah,
Series for a lot of people that may not know. And one of the guys was saying, "Oh, suddenly a lot of these have popped up for sale," which I was sad to hear, but I wasn't surprised
especially
because the
owning.
E30 is a kind of, it's a very usable classic car, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is very usable, and and again, because of a certain era, an age group of people remember them, and they want one now, and the convertible is very popular, and the 325 engine is amazing. So yeah, It is. It's a
But,
hard
but
one.
what happens with the, so one of the things that I've said to a lot of people is that we have the ULEZ situation.
Yeah,
And the ULEZ situation, I mean, we're not going to go into the prices of modern cars. I've covered that in another video, but just to
yeah,
give
yeah,
people a quick example, we're seeing a price to change between ULEZ compliant, non-ULEZ compliant, say
yeah,
2015, 2016 Golf TDI, if you like,
yeah,
price differential of about £3,500. So this is what's happened. So obviously non-compliant cars have lost value and compliant cars have jumped in value.
yeah, yeah.
But I
And they're
see,
hard to
see
get
this as
hold
a
of.
short-term thing. Would you
Mm.
agree?
Yes, and the petrol cars at the moment are really hard to get hold of, and that will be a short term thing because obviously think since COVID's been a big problem with the car market because obviously the prices of all cars went up, they all went through the roof, and obviously they were harder to get hold of, and they became they went up stupid amounts. But now I've seen that ease off. Actually, to be honest with you, so the same thing will happen. It'll ease off, and the prices will come back again to the normal prices.
So
But
tell me this: with the
yeah,
cars that we were talking about, so again, that's the sort of more modern cars, and
yeah,
like
it's
I said, we
modern.
don't
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
dwell on
modern.
that too much. But with
Yeah,
the cars that we were talking about, sort of the 80s and 90s,
yeah,
I've often said to people that they live in their own bubble because outside of the London area or the
yeah.
southeast area,
That's right.
surely their value shouldn't be affected, right?
No, they shouldn't be affected, but I think everyone's sitting back and thinking to themselves because of this. It's a hype in the press that people are reading up about it, and it's giving their negative thoughts about the car, especially obviously the 80s and 90s. They're sitting back and thinking about it more than they would have done. Like a lot of people they've always wanted one, and now they're thinking, well, actually maybe I'll look at something else, pre 83. And the prices, there's a lot come onto the market actually. And they have come down. There is a few bargains out there to be had at the moment. But I think that's to do with the crisis, not just the ULEZ, but obviously the way the country's in at the moment with the interest rates and
Right.
gas prices and the fuel price as well. You look at a Rolls Royce. If you want to run a Rolls Royce Silver Shadow 1 or 2, which obviously they come into the ULEZ compliant cars, they're just gas guzzlers, and they cost a fortune to run. So again, the prices they're an amazing car. I love a Silver Shadow 1 and 2. They're one of my favourite cars, but they just cost so much to run. That's why the prices have all stayed around, 7 to 12. You can get a very good example, for 10,000, a Silver Shadow 2. So that's another interesting one. It's not just because of, it's just because of the way the market is.
So
And the petrol
this is
price.
very interesting because what you're saying there is that although the market could be affected by ULEZ in the sense
Yeah,
that there's suddenly more cars available,
yeah,
however, there is also impacts from the cost of living crisis and the higher
that's
interest
right.
rates that's already happening.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So where do you see the market at the moment? Do you see that it's in this sort of, is it a long term
Transitional
dip? Is it
period.
a short dip, or what's happening?
Well, I think it's in a slight transitional period, and it is in a dip that the prices are going down slightly, but I think it'll be interesting to see what will happen next year. I don't know, to be honest with you. Certain if there are good examples, they will sell. They will sell, and they're priced right. Especially in the auction, the auctions seem to sort of have their own bubble, and they do fetch sometimes better prices than trying to sell the car privately yourself. But obviously, when you buy a car from some trade, then you get all the backup and the guarantees that you'd expect. So obviously there is a premium for that service. So I think as long as
So
the car is a good
let's
example,
it will sell.
it will sell. Yes,
So
yes.
let's break this
You
into
get the
two
price right.
parts. So let's first of all look at the modern classics as we've defined them, the
Yeah.
80s and 90s cars, because if, as you're saying, there are more of them around and the prices have had a downward pressure, then that would suggest that there's quite a few bargains at the moment. So
There
what
is
would be your top
bargains.
tips to look at if you wanted to get something like that at the moment?
Well, if you wanted to get, for argument's sake, like a Morris Minor, if you were sort of living in London, it's a
Yeah.
great car.
But let's stick with the 80s, 90s first, because then I want to talk
Well,
about the earlier cars as an
yeah. Okay.
opportunity for those hit by ULEZ. But let's stick with the 80s and 90s. What are your best tips for those cars? If as you say the prices have come down and there's quite a few in the market, what could people say if somebody that doesn't live in the ULEZ zone? What could they be looking at?
Well, I mean, the Golf GTIs, the convertibles, they're nice cars. They've always got a good following. The Mark One Golf GTI, they're very good. Like a Ford Capri as well. All Fords, they like an XR3. They're really good at the moment. They're really good.
Oh, but XR3Is they've become really quite rare, haven't they? You know,
They have,
from
and
being literally everywhere at one point.
they were, I know, and that's the thing. That's why they've become very sought after. And also, if you
You know, one of the
remember,
cars that you had, I remember at the auction,
yes,
was the car that I learned to drive in,
was it
and that was a
Metro?
Metro.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and again, an 80s, 90s car. At one point, the streets used to be full of them.
yeah.
Now they've almost disappeared.
I know. I mean, unfortunately, they all rotted away, most of them.
Right.
So now, people do. There is a few out there that are worth buying. But again, they've got to be pre-83. But obviously, if you hold off like 1984 next year, then if you buy an 84, you've only got a year to wait.
Yeah.
Mercedes 123s are great buys.
Yeah.
I think at the moment they do a good range. They've got a coupe, they've got the saloon, and the estate, is iconic. And they seem they're reliable workhorses as well. Again, it's something you could drive daily without worrying about it starting in the morning and you're having to fiddle around with it. So they're really good, and there's a lots of them available still. There's still a lot on the market, and they seem a good buy. They are very affordable. Mercedes, talking about Mercedes SLs, the 107, they're a lovely car. Depends on what sort of budget really you've got.
Yeah.
And again, you could run one of those every day, and quite comfortably. You wouldn't feel quite safe in that sort of thing. You got the BMW 6 Series. Again, they're become very, very decent examples, and the prices obviously. So if you're looking at a cheaper car like a Peugeot 205, you don't have to go for a GTI. You could just go for one of their special 1.1. Again, very economical. I noticed that I saw a Polo Mark 1 recently, really nice, 1983. It was about 3,500. Again, that's something you could just jump in and drive every day, and it's going to be very economical as well. So there's a lot.
Any Jaguars in your top tips?
It's what really you fancy as well. What?
Yeah.
I love a Mercedes, so that would be my top tip.
Because one of the things about the Jaguars, and actually this brings us on to the scrappage scheme a little bit, because I'm vehemently opposed to the scrappage scheme. I mean, I can understand that people take advantage of a situation that helps them financially, and I can't begrudge anyone for that.
No.
But personally, I detest them because I feel that so many potential great classics were killed off by the last scrappage scheme. I know that an entire fleet of XJSs and XJs were killed off, weren't they?
Yeah, and that's again made them go up in value. They have, At Series 3 Jaguar, they were actually, I've seen them. They're a good buy because they've got going up as well. But the problem with these cars is they do suffer from rust. Mechanically, mechanically they can be quite complicated, especially the Jaguar XJSs, and they do suffer from rust. So, and they did have a lot of bad press. So that's why a lot of people thought, well, we'll scrap them and get rid of them. So that's the other thing.
What about Japanese cars? Because again, when you're talking about, especially I think like late 80s and 90s cars, I mean, I was at the Petrol Hedonism live event on Sunday at Nebworth, and you looked around and the Nissans and
Nissan
GTRs and the Skoda Supras and
yeah. Well, again, they're really hard to get hold of, and that's why the prices are really strong still, and they're still holding their value. I mean, a Toyota Supra, a UK example, they can be 35 plus, and obviously the Skylines have gone through the roof. I mean, back in the 90s, Skylines were £8,000, and they've become great investments for people if they've kept hold of them. Like the Porsche, the air-cooled Porsches, they've gone up, massive amount. I've had quite a lot of air-cooled Porsches over time, and I paid between 8,000 and 15,000, and I think one of mine probably is worth about 50. It's a 964. I mean, obviously they don't fit into the ULEZ, but outside of the ULEZ, they're a great investment. You can, especially the 964, because not everyone liked them when they first came out, and still in the the early 2000s they weren't that sought after. You could pick up a nice example for 8,000, and now they're 35 plus. There's lots of cars like that. The Ford RS Turbo. No, I mean they were desirable, but they weren't. They were £1,500 in the early 2000s, and now they're 10 to 15. 205 GTIs, all those sort of things. Mark II Golfs are good news at the moment, actually. Mark II Golfs, they seem to be.
And what about American cars? Where do you see those at the moment? Particularly in the sort of, I wouldn't say 90s so much, but maybe 80s.
Yeah, again, the Corvettes and the Firebirds and that sort of thing. The problem I find with them, they have gone up, but it's the petrol. It's affording to run them. They are just literally, go out, have a bit of fun on a Sunday, and So, but I mean, again, it's the models.
I mean, you had a Camaro there as well.
That was a 19.
That was a 90s car, wasn't it? What year was that
Camaro.
one?
That was a 99 Camaro. Again, great value for money. I think it sold for 4,500 off the top.
Wow,
which is for nothing. So that was a Z28 as well.
Yeah,
and that was a V8. And if you wanted to get a cheap V8 muscle car, that was it.
And I looked at the car, and it looked immaculate. So $4,000 for that.
It was one owner from you. Yeah, it was a genuine probate sale as well, which was nice. So that had a lot of provenance to it, and it had huge amounts of file of service history, and even down to had loads of brochures, and it was really good, really nice. So someone's had a bargain there, and
I mean, $4,000, that's incredible. That is absolutely incredible. So then how much did the Firebird go for, the Trans Am?
14,000, yeah.
That's not bad.
That's very good, very good.
What year was that one?
That was an 81. 1980.
So 81. So, okay. So now, you know what? Now with this car, that segues us nicely into sort of ULEZ compliant pre-83 cars. So that was a perfect example. So for 14K, and again, I looked at the car when I was there, as you know, because I was all over it, and it was stunning. And it was a stunning car with a stunning interior.
Yeah.
And when you say 14K, I mean, that surely was a bargain that could be used, right?
Yeah, so it's 14,000 plus the 10%. But that was a real bargain as well, especially for a V8. Again, they can be up to 25,000. But I do think that does show the sort of where the market is at the moment with the car prices.
But don't you think that the prices of those cars, i.e. the pre-83 cars, is now going to rise, or at least for a while it's going to rise?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people are looking at them, and they are. I've been asked for pre-83 cars. And it's like the same difference with the petrol price of the cars at the moment. 2006 onwards, they're commanding a premium.
So tell
And
me, when you say that you've been asked for pre-83 cars,
yeah,
so elaborate on that. What sort of cars are people looking for, and what's going on in the market right now?
well, they're sort of asking, as we're sort of talking about now, what I think they should be getting, which is going to be reliable and not going to cost them a fortune. Going back to if you bought a Rolls Royce Silver Shadow,
Yeah. Yeah.
you've only got, you're looking at thousands. They're affordable. That's the thing.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
a cute car. A Jaguar XJ6 again. They can be a minefield. So, but no, I mean, people have asked Peugeot 205. Again, they're hard to get hold of those 83 because more
Yeah.
80, 85, 86. They were more mass produced then, and there were early days in 83. So, but yeah, and the other thing is, if you think about it, you can buy a car, wait, a year, and then it will be. Obviously, if you're in London, then it's not gonna help.
So tell me, what do you recommend? I mean, if somebody says, all right, like you said, that same scenario where somebody wants an 83 car or earlier. I mean, let's even we can go back to the 70s or whatever, or even further if you wish. But the proviso being, I mean, I know you mentioned a car earlier, which I'll come back to. The proviso being that it's something that they want to be able to use, not just for car shows, but actually use, but within the ULEZ zone. And I know you mentioned, for example, the Morris Minor. Could the Morris Minor and cars like the Beetle, the original Beetle, could they be contenders?
No, that was one of my ones on the list, actually, a VW Beetle. I'm a VW fan myself as well. I love VW Beetles. And actually T2 camper vans as well, and T25 camper vans. You can use one of those daily, especially a T25. You could use one of those daily and take your family and your kids to school in one of those. I've taken my kids to school in a T25 many a times. I've had T25s and I've driven one daily. The Morris Minor again is they're affordable as well. You can get a decent example between 3.5 to it depends what you want. Do you want a traveller? Do you want a convertible? Obviously the Travellers and the convertibles are miles more expensive than just a normal big 4-door saloon. You can get a nice example for 5,000. Beetles again, you can get a good 303 70s one. They're nice, or that as a daily would be absolutely fine.
Would that be German made, or would that be like the Mexican one?
German made, yeah. The Mexico was the later ones. They came out and actually they're in the 90s. But yeah, the like a 1303, a 74 for argument's sake, 1974. They up to the 80. They are good. You could use one of those daily, and of course it's economical, and free tax. So
I was going to say Mini as well. But I think the Mini prices have rocketed though, haven't they? I mean, it's almost
the prices have rocketed on Minis. Yeah. To get a good example, your minimum is 5,000. But again, that's not a lot in terms of a car.
I mean, I'm surprised to hear you say that, because I would be surprised if you could find a good example for $5,000. I thought a minimum 10, 15K.
Yeah, no, that was the one at the auction was an 87. So again, it's not actually ULEZ, but yeah, I've seen them on Car and Classics and eBay. Mm-hmm. If you want to do a little bit of work, it's 5,000. Yeah, right. To 10. It all depends on what condition and your budget at the end of the day.
Yeah. And old Fords, I guess, is another example. So you mentioned the Capri earlier, and obviously the Capri lineage does go into ULEZ, but they started back in the 70s. But and are they cars? But they're quite expensive as well, aren't they?
Yeah, the Ford Capris are. Yeah. I mean, a 2.8. They're stupid money now. They're between 12 to 30,000, depending on what condition you want to get. But early 70s ones, they're a little bit more affordable. They're 7,000. I mean, a Ford Escort Mark III, you can get an early Mark III Escort for about 5,000, and then obviously the Escort Mark I. they've gone through the roof. Their
Mm.
basket cases are 10 to, and then if you want a Mexico, they're like 35 minimum,
Wow.
and Mark II escorts as well. So they are. I mean, a Mark II escort, you could have, the saloon, the L's and stuff like that. Yeah, I've seen them around the 5K mark. You could drive one of those easily every day, and it'd be quite a nice car to drive, and very reliable and easy to work on. If you want to get your hands dirty and learn, like the Morris Minor is one of the easiest cars to learn to work on, to start, your mechanics, sort of servicing a car yourself. It's very easy.
And the other advantage, I suppose, with those type of cars is there's a huge industry here that supports them, right? There's lots of specialists. Right. Parts are relatively easy to get.
There's a lot of companies that support the spare parts. And same with VW as well, the camper vans and the Beetles. There's lots of companies out there like Just Campers and Custom and Commercial and those sort of places. They all supply, body parts, all bits and pieces for servicing items and stuff. So yeah.
What else can we think of? Late
affordable.
70s.
Well, I mean, the Triumph, you've got the Triumph 2000 if you wanted a saloon. The Triumph Stag if you want to. Yeah. We've actually got one coming up in the auction, which I think is a good guide price.
The Triumph Stags are very popular in the clubs, I've noticed. The Afro Classics Register, they've got tons of Stags in their group as well. They're very, very popular.
Yeah. I mean, again, you want to get a good one, so you want to be spending 8 to 15 on one. Eubanks have got a nice one. The guy had stopped driving because he had a problem with his knee. He couldn't use a clutch anymore, and he's had it as a toy since 2015. And he used to drive that down to Devon to his holiday home. That's guided between 8 and 12, and I think that's good. I mean, obviously you've got the Rover P5, P6s, and even the 3000s as well. Yeah. They're lovely cars as well.
What used to be my favorite was the 3500s, but those are not. They're not around. I mean, they've all died, haven't they?
You don't see them. Funny enough, I actually did see one the other day. I passed one, really? And I was shocked. Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of younger guys buying cars as well. In their 20s. Yeah, Rover. Especially like the Morris Minors and that sort of thing. Austin A30, a young guy I sold one to a while back.
That's interesting, actually. Let's talk about that a little bit, because it's funny you should say that, because I noticed recently some of Chiro brought some of his cars down to one of the protests at Whitehall. I think it was last week or the week before. And one of the cars that he brought down was a Mazda RX-7, the original RX-7.
Oh, yeah, right?
Yeah, and I thought, it'd be like somebody my age driving it or whatever. No, it was like this young kid was driving it, and he was loving it.
No, that's right. Yeah, and some I've sold a Rover. I mean, that's not obviously the 80s. That's 2002 Rover 25. And those Rovers now, I think, are becoming into their own as well. But no, absolutely. And the MR2, the 80s MR2. Great car.
Yes, that's a good tip, isn't it?
You could drive one every day, and you've got the T-bar as well, so you've got the best of both worlds. In the summer, you can take the T-bar out, and in the winter, you can keep it in. And, and another reliable car, because the last thing you want is to buy, something, and you're going to have nothing but problems.
Isn't it a shame, Matt, that the Japanese classics, unfortunately, like the drivetrain wise, they were so reliable, but unfortunately the bodies have just rusted to bits.
And that's the same with the Alphas as well. Yeah. And actually Ford, to be honest with you, most of them, rotted away. But you don't see any Alphas nowadays, the Alpha studs and stuff.
That's right.
Like that.
It's a real shame. And going back to the demographics again, with the age of the drivers, I mean, this is quite hopeful, actually, isn't it? If you see the younger, and I do wonder, like, as motoring restrictions sort of encroach further and further upon, newer cars, do you think that we're going to start to see more people move to the older cars, and actually we're going to see a younger generation start to embrace them?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and especially the sort of 2001 onwards cars as well. As I was saying I did sell a Rover 75 to a guy, and he was in his 20s again. and also, there's
That's quite funny actually, because the Rover 75 was like an old man's car, wasn't
it
it?
was
You
an
know,
old
although
one.
I always liked them. You know,
Yeah. And but the thing is that they're actually a really good car.
they are. They actually are.
And they've got
I
such.
always, tell me if you feel the same, Matt. But I always rated the Rover 7 because it came out about the same time as the Jaguar S Type. But I
That's right.
always preferred the
And that's right.
75. I thought it was a better car.
Yeah, I did. And the diesels were the BMW engine, which were brilliant, but so were the 2-litre 2.5 V6s.
Yeah.
It's very silky smooth, and in auto, it's just a lovely cruiser. And again, a great option because you can get a Tourer, you can get the estates. So they're interesting. What else was I talking about?
I mean, you've got the Rovers that are happening, Fords are happening. Is there anything from Vauxhall that people should be considering? I mean, I know that Calibra once upon a time was an incredible car, but I don't know if there's any Calibras left.
There are Calibras about, yeah. But again, few and far between. So, I mean, the Cavaliers are more accessible. You can get. I mean, I saw one up for sale again on I think it was Car and Classics, and it was like 3,500. It was an 84. So again, you wait a little while next year, and then it'll be ULEZ compliant, and that would be a great everyday car as well. Ford Orion as well.
What's happening to the Vauxhalls? What were they called here? Because in what were they called in the UAE? They were called the CSV, the V8s, the GTOs. They were called, but they were. I think over here they were the Vauxhall, maybe the Vauxhall GTOs. I can't remember. They were the V8 ones that came from America.
V8. It came from Australia.
Yeah, Australia. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. I do. I know what you mean.
You know what I mean, right? So I'm sure people will comment. I'm sure people will put the name in the comments below because we've both forgotten them momentarily. But you know the car I mean, right?
No, I do. I know exactly what you mean. But I've never ever driven one.
They're awesome. They're awesome. I've driven them several times in the UAE. I drove the Middle East spec versions, and they were just tremendous cars.
Yeah, I'll have to have a look at that when we come offline. Yeah, have a look at that. Seamless. Yeah. That's
CSV CR8 is what it's come to me now. So they were sold in the Middle East as the Chevrolet CSV CR8. That's what they were sold as. But it was the same car that we got here under a different name.
Yeah. No, right-hand drive, I remember.
Right-hand drive, but they were absolutely brilliant. Very, very cool. Great muscle cars, sort of modern muscle cars.
Car. Yeah. No, I've never been in one. I've never driven one. Actually, I'll have to have a look at one of those. See what the prices are.
Definitely. And how about further back? Shall we go even further back? If we look at 60s stuff that might still be affordable, what could we be looking at?
Well, 60 stuff which could be affordable. That's quite a good question because obviously, again, as I say, Beetles, you got Beetles. They are 60s Beetles at 8, and Morris Minors. Austin A30, they're affordable.
They're always a good one, aren't they? And there's plenty of those around, aren't there? Still.
Yeah, Ford Zodiac. They're affordable. Ford Zephyr. They're iconic.
Any Citroens around? Citroen DS?
Citroen DS, they're still about. They're quite expensive.
Right.
Yeah, they're quite a complicated.
2CV maybe.
2CV, yes, 2CV, definitely 2CV. They're great cars. Yeah. No, I'm just trying.
So I think the overall
MGB GT.
Sorry?
MGB.
Yeah, of course. How have we forgotten the MGs? Yeah, plenty of those about, aren't there?
And obviously another good range because you've got the GT, you've got the Roadster, and you've got the Midget actually.
Yeah.
Austin Frog Eye Sprite as well. Yeah. They're about 10 to 12. Well.
And again, with the MGs and these cars, although they do have their fair share of problems, but again, there's a good service industry that supports them.
Yeah, there's loads of people which will support them, and loads and loads of places that sell parts for MG. And obviously,
you can get entire bodies for them, can't you?
Yeah, and there's there's MG Owners Club which you can buy parts for, and loads of advice with all the forums. It's huge, and the GT you can drive every day. We drive all of them every day. obviously.
So I think that, as we bring this to a close,
Hmm.
I think the picture that we're kind of getting here is quite an optimistic one, because although
It's
we're going
very
to be
optimistic.
forced out of our 80s and 90s cars, but there still is an entire catalog, a back catalog of amazing vehicles
Yeah,
that are still
there's a
available to
huge
us.
there's a huge range of cars out there. I don't think anyone needs to worry at all. There's loads and loads of different. It depends what tickles your fancy as well. It's yeah. There's lots and lots of cars out there. We could actually probably go on all day. We start thinking off the top of our heads. We'll come up
Exactly.
with all sorts. But I do think,
But tell me this then, in summation, in addition to the fact that we believe that there's plenty of choices for people, we'll see a transition. So I think
yeah,
what's going to happen is we'll see a transition, sort of a geographic transition of
yeah,
cars sort of moving out of the southeast and other cars moving in. But
yeah,
how long do you think before the sort of market sort of settles down a little bit? Because obviously we're seeing this fluctuation at the moment, A, because of ULEZ, and
yeah,
B, because of interest rates, and C, because of the cost of living crisis. But
yeah.
when do you anticipate the market sort of settling down into a more sort of normalized state?
Well, I think next year, April springtime next year is always a good time to see and look at the prices. I think that'll be a good test then just to see what's happening.
So,
Revisit.
so best advice at the moment for people is to hold on to their cars and then plan to do a
Yeah,
change maybe towards spring next year.
yeah, that's right. It's never a good time to sell a car around December, January, February. It never is. So yeah, so you're better off holding off until April, and yeah. But I mean, also going the pre the 2001. There's so many good cars there as well that like a Renault Clio 182, 172. They're sort of becoming quite desirable. And the Ford, when you go look back on the Fords, the Ford Focus Mark One, ST 170s, they're really cheap still. You can get one, a really good example for like 2,500. And if you look at the Mark One RS Focus, it's a great car, reliable as well. And you can take that to a car show, and people will be all over it. So
I tell
I
you
mean,
what,
even like down to a Bentley GT, you
I
can
tell
get.
you what, you've just made an interesting proposition there, because if you can pick up like a car like that, like you said, that Focus
Yeah,
ST for about 2 grand, and say
yeah,
you have to sell your current car, then even if you were to get out of like a 10K car or
yeah,
a 12K car into one of those,
yeah.
you're still going to more than make up the difference that you'd have to pay for the ULEZ, even if you drove it every day.
And it'll be a
You
bit of fun. It's cheap,
yeah,
it's bargain motoring,
yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and it's
And at the same time, it'll appreciate as long as it's a good car. It'll actually
yeah,
go up
and
in
also it's
value.
a good car, good mileage, good condition, and I think that's what's selling cars at the moment. There's
Yeah.
lots and lots of bad examples out there, and they just won't sell. Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of people out there, obviously, with the historic vehicles that they
Yeah.
just put them on up for sale, and they're just not roadworthy, and that's the thing. People need to be sensible about what they're going to do, because obviously you don't want to just go out, get it checked out, get checked over by a mechanic that you trust, because obviously you can go and buy a historic vehicle that doesn't need an MOT, and you can go and insure it and just drive it. But you need to make sure that the brake pipes are okay, the brakes are good, and because you just drive off, and you don't want to be not stopping. But it's yeah.
Yeah, you
So
don't want to drive off into the
yeah, so
sunset and
that's
then
the
conk
thing.
out.
You've got to be very careful with what you're looking. Yeah.
Awesome. So listen, Matt, this has been fantastic. I think there's been a lot of useful information here, and hopefully people will be
No
able to
problem.
go away and make great purchasing decisions off the basis of this. Just tell everybody where they can find you if they want to get in touch with you.
I'm on Instagram, MKG Autos. You can find me on Instagram, and I'm sort of sort of sorting out my social media. So Instagram is the best bet at the moment. Yeah, yeah.
And when is the next Eubanks auction you were mentioning?
It's actually at the 29th of September, the next
Okay.
the Eubanks auction. Yes,
And that'll be online, will it?
that'll be online as well. Yeah, that's
Okay.
online.
And some top tips from
Eubanks.co.uk.
that? Some good cars in there?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, there's a nice Triumph Stag, the Defender, Land Rover Series 2. That's a very good price as well, and that's That's a nice, very good example that a gentleman's restored that. And there's a collection of Robin Reliance, 7
Ooh.
Robin Reliance from a deceased estate, and he was an avid collector of Robin Reliance. And there's one there. There's a 78 up to the 90s. And again, there's a full range of cars there. There's a Mercedes CLK that's sort of genuine low mileage, 65,000 miles, and it's a 2001. So again, that fits into the ULEZ criteria. And the guide price is between 3 and 4 for that. And again, that's a great car. And I think that's going to go up in value. So you look at the Mercedes SLs and the Mercedes 124 convertibles, CLK, and it is ULEZ. So it fits the criteria. And I think they're a lovely looking car. And you can just drive it daily. They're very reliable. And this is a rust-free example. You have got to watch out for rust on those as well.
Definitely.
So,
Cool.
so again, there's lots of cars out there.
There's lots of cars out there. There's a few coming up at auction. Matt, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you again.
I'll speak to you soon. Yeah, take care. See you later.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye.
Brown car guy.
Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please hit the like button and share this video as well if you can. And while you're at it, check out these guys who also sponsor my content. I am deeply grateful to them because it helps me to buy new equipment, put fuel in the cars, and yes, buy a cup of coffee. You can do the same. Just go here or right here on YouTube. Just hit these 3 little dots down here and click on thanks. Make sure you're signed in first. My content is free, but this is how you can help me keep it that way. I may even send you a gift. Oh, by the way, watch this next.